Good day. Thank you so much for joining the session 2 of the third Swiss Chinese Life Science Forum. It is co-organized by the Swiss Chinese Chamber of Commerce, SCCC, Basel Area Swiss, and Fisher. My name is Fiona Gao, Senior Lawyer and Manager of China Life Sciences Group at Swiss law firm Fisher. I am the moderator of today's session. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions, please type them into the Q&A box in your Zoom control panel below. Today's session is recorded and you can watch the recording later on the event page of SCCC. At session 1 that took place last Tuesday, we've covered the COVID-19's impact on several line functions within the industry. For example, commercial, supply chain, medical affairs, and clinical trials. Today's topic is the challenges and opportunities in the BD and financing activities from both Swiss and Chinese perspective. Joining us today is a panel of CEOs and senior executives from Swiss and Chinese life sciences companies and investment funds. Each of the panelists has 20 to 30 years of experience in the industry. I will introduce them from left to right. So first, we have Michael Bauer. He's the CEO at Celestia Biotech AG. Next is Oscar Busset, co-founder, CEO at Morphogene SA. Shang Jiang, founder, CEO at Yafo Capital, based in China. Dr. Jean-Pierre Hossa, managing partner and founder at 4FO Venture Partners. Then Michael Wang, VP for Business Development at China Grand Pharma. He is currently based in Wuhan. So I will first start with Michael Wang. So Michael, how was the life and work in Wuhan during the 76 days lockdown? Michael?
Sorry, it's muted again. And thank you, Fiona, for the introduction. And thank you, everyone. I was in Wuhan. I am based in Wuhan. I did experience the difficulties in the lockdown. And well, the situation was basically no transportation, no, their production facilities were shut down. Office buildings were closed, and many of the things are affected. And well, more importantly, people were asked to stay at home. No outdoor activities were allowed, and you can't go outside for grocery shopping, and you have to use your collective, well, the order for the groceries sponsored by the government for ordering and delivering. So there are a lot of aspects of that time were affected, and it's been quite some difficult time for every resident in Wuhan, not only in Wuhan but also in Hubei province.
Great, thank you, Mike.
Yeah.
So please.
Well, the other aspect of that is some of the things were still remaining active, like hospital services, anything that supports hospital works, and like we are a pharmaceutical company, we provide life saving products, medicines, antivirals, expectorants, adrenalines for standard of care at hospitals. Yeah, so we were granted a special right to operate at that time to provide the needed service to maintain the system. So so civilian lives were pretty much suppressed, and well, only limited activities were actually going on. But it's basically I think it's well organized, and people are still being able to maintain a relatively serene life, even when they were asked to stay at home. I think that's basically what's happening during the lockdown
Great to
in Wuhan.
know. Great to know. But the pandemic hasn't really slowed down your work. You have closed 3 deals during this time, even with travel limitations. Could you please tell us how did you and your team manage that?
Well, that is some question, and I'm saying that a lot of things were actually affected, and but as much as business development is concerned, I think two things actually helped us a lot without actually delaying much of the work. And one thing is that we did a lot of online discussions. We talked with our target companies, and we speak to the management. We had online negotiations and things like that. We conduct expert interviews for KOLs' opinions on products, and we also have internal reporting systems running also with the help of online conferences. So that part is one that we've been able to manage. And the second part of doing a business development work is part of the due diligence is actually you have to visit the site, you have to visit the lab, you have to see for your own eyes to see it. And we can't do that. We can't travel. We can't do that as we normally would do. So what we did was we came up with this idea of asking the target company actually to record video, to make video recordings of the facilities, of the plan, of the activities, and we asked them to come up with commentaries, and we included a term called representation warrants in the agreement to make sure that there's something, to say that what we presented is true, is truth and nothing but truth, to make sure that this is what is actually happening. We take great credit in that, and to make things are actually done. Mm-hmm. It's not ideal, but we get things done, and that is basically the thing that we try to come up with in order to continue the process.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, thank you, Michael, for sharing. It's impressive to learn how you've overcome the challenges and didn't let the pandemic stand in your way. Now we turn to Sean to learn VC/PE side of the story in China. Sean, how did the COVID-19 pandemic affect the VC and PE activities in China? Any slowing down in reviewing new projects?
Hi, Fiona. I think definitely yes for the investment on the VCs and PEs in China. I think this is like the same phenomena that happens that people see in America or in Europe. I think in the beginning, everyone was in a very panic situation, and people don't know how bad it can be. So I would say this whole I think this whole situation experienced like 3 different stages. So in the beginning, I mean, people were in the panic, and almost all the funds and investors decided not to look at any new investment opportunity at all. I think for China, that was just right after the Chinese New Year, and for most of the PE and VC funds, their priority was to how to keep their existing portfolio companies survive during this pandemic. And then during the second stage, that was almost, I think, in about April period, when the new cases in China dropped to like single digit or around 10 each day, and people less worried. And then, people, I think, we began to see, people started to do roadshows, and VCs also opened their door for new to review new investment opportunities. And so that's that's improving. And but I think, after June, May and June, I think, things changed completely. And I think, what we have seen, in the Chinese stock market, especially the listing of, so many biotech and healthcare companies in the Chinese main board, and also in Hong Kong stock exchange, that really excited, investors, and also healthcare companies. And I think up to now, based on my observation, I think, the investment mentality for VC and PEs has been, totally, completely returned to the previous level before the COVID-19. If it's not, more crazy. Yeah.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Sean. Glad to learn that despite the disruption from the COVID-19, the investment circle in China still values the life sciences industry and potentially will be more interested in investing the life science projects. So if we count, basically based on what you said, there is probably 3 or 2 to 4 months being interrupted. Now let's into the Swiss perspective. Oscar, your company Morphogene closed the seed round financing with the Chinese company late last year and the beginning of this year. And the end of the closing was impacted slightly by the first wave of the COVID-19 in China, but luckily you could find workaround solutions. Could you please share with us your experience and learnings?
Sure. Thanks very much. So Morphogene, we first were in touch, just give you the whole background of our fundraising quest, is we first were in touch with our Chinese investors in about June, July of last year. And quickly there was visits exchange with our team. Part of our team's in Chicago, part of our team's here in Switzerland. There were first initial visits exchanged between the Chicago team. Professor Hubble received a delegation from China, went then to Shanghai and visited a delegation there. Things went very quickly. I was invited to an event in China, in Shanghai, in November to present our company and meet the principals there. And we signed the deal, all the investment agreements, shareholders agreements, in December. The actual closings, the actual signatures then will be collected in January. And this was complicated by 2 things. First of all, many people were at JPM early in January, and then the Chinese New Year, and then of course, COVID. And COVID really had a big impact in that people couldn't get to their offices, even to review documents, to sign documents, to have them mailed back. And one particularity, being a Swiss company, is we need, in some cases, legalized signatures, which are difficult to obtain in the best of times in China. And the only place that we could identify in Shanghai that could legalize a signature for board memberships, etc., was the Swiss embassy in Shanghai. Unfortunately, that closed during the crisis, and I think its reopening time was sometime in April, which of course would have been quite a difficult delay to put up with, because the investment funds would not be accessible until their registration of the investment happened here in the commercial registry, and that of course necessitated these signatures from China. Thankfully, I think the relationships we built up with our Chinese investors in that short period, in the 6 months, because of the visits back and forth, put in a certain level of trust, I guess, between the founding team, the company, and the investors. And we found workarounds where our team in China, our investors in China, accepted not to be initially on the commercial registry in Switzerland, and that allowed us to proceed with just Swiss resident responsibles for the company. So that was how we worked around it.
Thank you, Oscar. We're glad to learn your positive experience in dealing with Chinese investors, and certainly we could see there is a mutual trust from both sides during this difficult time. Now we turn to Jean-Pierre. So what are the impacts on VC and PE activities in Switzerland and in Europe in general? And what are the impacts on the BD activities of your portfolio company?
Well, thank you. I think I might have a much bleaker view than my colleague. Maybe also because the doubtful privilege to be infected with COVID pretty badly, I should say. So I've been firsthand living the crisis, both personally at the business level. What we have done at 4FO, and I'm not sure I can talk for all the VC funds in Europe, but it's take a very, very, very cautious attitude. We did 3 closing during the COVID period, but these were the remnant and the leftover of the work that we did last autumn. Actually, one closing with Chinese co-investors. So we did some deals. We did a joint venture in Tianjin with another of our companies, so 3 closings. So lots of activity, actually a huge amount of activity during the COVID crisis. But on the other side, on the bleak side, on the negative side, we stopped every single due diligence that we had underway. So deals that were not in the final stretch, and what I mean final stretch is due diligence done over decision to invest taken, and basically dealing with shareholder agreement and investment agreement. All these deals were terminated. All the other ones were terminated. We've made some difficult decision at the fund level because I think the damages are in front of us and not behind us. We made the decision, one, to stop new investment until we have a better vision. Second, to set aside a special reserve for all companies that will have increased financial needs. And the third one, we are ready to kill 1 or 2 projects if needs be. So it's we decided to be over supportive with our best company, and over aggressive or over heartless with the company that we believe are in a difficult situation. And it goes on both sides. So you push the best and you kill the worst. So that's basically the decision that we have taken. That's something that is hopefully bound to change, but not for 2020. So it's a difficult situation. It's been difficult to deal with, and the one thing that where I meet my esteemed colleagues and people that I've talked before, it has been a period, I'd say, compared to a normal period where activity was increased by at least 50 to 60%. Cost, trying to get grants, trying to get government support, in parallel with the usual activity, in parallel of managing a HR crisis and staff crisis, and trying to keep the staff, you're trying to find money, you're trying to keep the business afloat. So it's been very difficult, very intense period. I don't know what the future holds, frankly. I'm a little bit concerned that what we're seeing right now is going to stick with us for a few more months, and we should be ready. Plan for the worst, hope for the best, and we've heard that before.
Great. Thank you for sharing, and we certainly hope for the best health for you personally, and also we hope that the investment circle in Switzerland, the investment activities will rebound as well as China later this year or the beginning of next year. But it probably ties very closely to the development of the pandemic in Europe. However, we shall not be hindered only by the challenges and difficulties. We shall also looking into the opportunity that comes along. So now I turn to Michael Bauer, CEO of Celestia based in Basel. Michael, the Series A financing round of Celestia was financed by 2 Chinese PE funds, and they are not really part of the usual investor circle coming from most Swiss life sciences company perspective. So was there any hesitation or pushbacks from the management or the board to go through this deal?
Fiona, thanks for the question. Actually, I need to clarify. We had Series A and Series B financing in 2018 and 19, both with 20 million. And the Chinese investment funds, or let's say the Asian investment funds, because we've got Chinese and South Korean, participated in this financing round. They didn't take the whole round. Okay, they were about 25% of the round.
Okay.
So in that sense, that has led to participation of Asian investors in our company, around 13% of total equity. And you're right, our financing is kind of unusual in the grand scheme of things. We are financed basically by largely very qualified private investors, people from the pharma industry, people like David Epstein, former CEO of Novartis, and other people I can't mention by name here, and also family offices from Switzerland, large private investors from the US, from David's network, and institutional investors from Europe and from Asia. So like PPF group in Amsterdam is also a major stakeholder. So we're not kind of financed by the usual suspects in terms of the VC finance industry. However, we've seen that this setup has brought us a very strong and very qualified and let's say understanding and supportive shareholder base and a lot of internal let's say governance from that, because they're basically all our investors are really experts and hands-on people from the pharma industry. So in that sense, there was no pushback from any management or investors. There were a few people who were just asking the valid question, like, who are these people? Who are these funds? What are they doing? And we experienced through the due diligence and also thereafter extremely professional and supportive and really an in-depth understanding of what we're doing from our new investors, in particular from the Asian investors, who I think there's a common theme on the investors that have participated in Celestia. Basically, the people who have worked on the field before and really understand what we're doing, that they're all in. Those who are a bit more distant, some of them took the difficulty to really understand the science behind what we're doing, and also invested, but people who didn't take the time actually said, oh, it's maybe a bit too complicated. Now, as we're going forward, we know our drug works. We are finishing phase 1 and right now preparing financing for phase 2, as well as really expanding our pipeline. So really getting a broader view of the company. So we're still looking for people and parties that are interested on this journey. And as I said, we know the concept works. We know the drug works. It's safe. And now we're preparing for phase 2.
Great, thank you. And your existing investor in Shanghai introduced your company to a local Chinese CRO. And what is the experience so far?
Very good experience. We have, of course, done our diligence and also did a bidding process to look at other CROs. They came out by far as the best in terms of engagement, qualification. I mean, all these people there have made their careers in either pharma or CRO industry. in the West, in the East, in China, in US, in Europe. So they're really bringing a good blend of local knowledge as well as international experience. And I must say, from all CROs I've worked with so far, the degree of reliability is very different to the positive side. They're really engaged and part of the team, in contrast to many CROs where you have to really run after every day and make sure they're doing what they're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
Very positive, I have to say.
Okay, thank you. Great. So I think we're all inspired by this positive example that experienced by your company. Not only you get Asian investor, but also it's kind of strategic partnership that they help you with introducing more resources and not only in Europe, but also regional, like in other countries. Okay, now we turn the topic to the potential impacts of geopolitical tensions on Swiss-Chinese collaboration investments. And we want to see if we could find more synergy between Switzerland and China in the future. And now I will turn to Sean. So in recent years, the geopolitical tension, especially the US-China trade war, has occupied the media and has great impact on cross-border investment and business transactions. Especially the US CPS review has put Chinese investment to US life sciences projects under scrutiny. And do you think, Sean, if the focus of Chinese investments in the life science sector has shifted from US to EU? Hello, Sean? You are muted. Hello, Sean? Hello, Sean? Maybe he has difficulties to connect for the moment. So let's move on to the next speaker. Sean, can you hear us? Okay, so let's wait Sean to come back to us. And now I first turn to the Swiss side. So actually in Europe, there are many countries also have laws regimes for state control and over foreign investment, even though Switzerland has not yet instituted a comprehensive screening of inbound investments. And there has been on and off debates on this topic over the years. And Jean-Pierre, in your opinion, what would be the outlook for Chinese investment in Swiss life sciences industry? And what would be the voice, in your opinion, of the industry?
This has been an ongoing discussion for the last 2-3 decades, and now people are talking about China, but I can assure you that 20 years ago, people were talking about US. I've a long experience as an entrepreneur. I sold companies to Swiss company to US companies, and I have people at the Swiss government that called me the killer of Swiss technology because it was going to the US. The bottom line is that each country should focus on what they're best at. That's my position. Switzerland has a unique capacity of innovation, invention, development. We're very good at what we do. May that be in medtech, biotech, AI, and other very high field. Where we lack capacity, with of course they're always exception to the rule. Where we lack capacities to bring products to the next level, may that be in terms of competences or financing. The expansion rounds, the 150, 200 million rounds are very difficult to do in Switzerland, though companies that reach the point where they have products that can reach a large population need to find alternatives. I have absolutely no second thought to make transactions with entities, and regardless of the nationality, or basically to structure deals where basically you're able to bring product to the next level. The bottom line of the industry, you're developing products for people. And if you're not able at one point or another to bring this product to the people, and some people have a better capacity to do that, let's do it. I had this discussion many times with people, political level people in Switzerland. And I said, well, the bottom line is you make a company, it's sold to US or China or any other companies, then there is a new one coming. We have this unique capacity to roll one company after another. So this business model, within the limit and within keeping it morally defensible, I think is a good one. Politically, Switzerland, I think, and that's my own opinion, has the potential to be in a unique position in the years to come. Europe is scared of making deals or scared of having technology leaving Europe. The US is what it is today. And Switzerland has, a few unique advantages in that respect. And we could position ourselves as the brain of the world, so to speak, or the inventor of the world. And bear in mind that Switzerland is one of the very few countries in the world that has a free trade agreement with China. Iceland is another one for fish, and Switzerland is obviously for technology. So why not take advantage of that if there is a synergy and everybody's happy? That's my position.
Yes.
So that's definitely something that we're pushing at the fund level, at the investment level, finding these synergies.
Yeah, so thank you very much for sharing. It's certainly very positive. And yes, indeed, in terms of innovation, it's supposed to be 1 + 1 more than 2. And so each party brings what's the best from their side and create something amazing. And so now, since Sean is back online, and I will ask him the question from before. So in recent years, there have been, especially the trade war between China and US. Hello, Sean.
Hi, can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
I heard your question. Yeah.
So you heard my question earlier. So
yes.
you think the focus of Chinese investments in the life science sector has shifted from US to China?
Sure. Yeah, thanks for the question. Sorry, I got some connection problem. So it's really the trade war has significant impact on the investment between China and the US. I think I saw the number that, Chinese investment into the US, from equity, PE and VC investment has dropped significantly last year. I think the number was somewhere around 15 to 20%. I can't remember the exact number, but on the other hand, Chinese investment to Europe has increased dramatically. I think somewhere between 20 to 30% increase, and so I think this is positive for Europe. I think let's talk about life science. I think during the last 10 years, the demand from Chinese pharmaceutical and the investor side has changed a lot. 5 years ago, it was more the investment to life science outside China was more to late stage assets like approved drugs or phase 3 products. But 3 years ago, people are competing, investors are competing, phase 3 assets. And then 2 years ago, up to now, most of the deals that have been done are at phase 2 stage versus, very late stage assets. So what's going to happen in the next 5 years? And I think, in my opinion, China will go definitely more towards early stage and development stage, R&D stage assets. So I mean, this will European company like Switzerland will have a good shot because of super innovative capability in life science. So to me, I mean, I'm very positive on future of Chinese investment into Switzerland technologies, and we have seen quite a few significant deals that China has completed with Switzerland companies in the this year. But I think back to the U.S. question, I think no matter how political situation will change or remain the same. I mean, America remains the number one country in terms of new drug development, or at least for approved drugs. I mean, it's over 50% of the new drugs approved. So I mean, Americans will still remain like the most important market for Chinese investors, because I mean we don't have too much choice. But I mean Europe will definitely have better chance. I mean to get Chinese investment. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Sean, for thank you, Sean, for sharing. So basically, we've learned that, and so basically we've learned that, oh, sorry. So okay, so I move on. For the past, so now I turn to Oscar to compare more the U.S. versus China side. So Oscar, for the past companies you've founded and co-founded, you've dealt with many investors from the U.S. In your view, what are the similarities and differences when dealing with U.S. and Chinese investors?
Okay. Yeah, so Morphogene's my fourth project that's been funded, fourth independent project. I started my first one, what was it now, 24 years ago, with my own PhD out of EPFL. And that was actually, we raised our initial funding with European investors in France. So we ended up starting the company just across the border from Geneva in France. And back then we had French investors as seed investors in a Series A. And it was early days, right? It was 1996 timeframe. I remember people were still excited about Netscape as a hot IPO that was about to come out, and the European investors back then were our first investors were people who were used to investing in the local boulangerie and things like this. So it was an entirely different game. The EPFL at the time couldn't take equity in its own spin-offs and its own startups. But it insisted on royalties, which was, the total, the worst thing that a university could do for one of its own startups, because when you're a young startup, cash is blood. And but on the other hand, equity, they would have made much more money if they had taken equity at the time in the end, because we did end up IPOing and eventually selling our company only 4 years later. So my second company, again, founded in 2003, was a spin-off from another European university, and that university was insisting in the early days on a very large equity stake in the company, only because, and there was no IP, there were no patents, there was some software code, but they insisted on the large equity stake only because they had trained the engineers, the science team that was co-founders. So I think things evolve over time. Those conditions, now everybody's pretty much aligned themselves to U.S. universities, U.S. tech transfer offices. From a VC point of view, I have an experience, a sample size of one now with Chinese investors, and a few of the things that I noticed that I found interesting, and I can totally understand the point of view. And there were discussions and negotiations that we worked through with them where they insisted on the founders having skin in the game. Right, that we not only invest our founding capital, which in Switzerland for an SA is not negligible, contrary to the situation in the US, but they insisted even that we put more money in than just the founding capital. They wanted to vest all the founders' shares. So essentially, every share that the founders held in the company would be vesting if the Chinese investors had their way with that. On the other hand, another big positive thing is they did not want to control the company. So in my previous experience, in particular with U.S. professional investors, they wanted some means to have absolute voting rights, the 50% plus one, or at least a path to get there eventually. And that's not something that's come up at all with our Chinese investors. So on the one hand, having skin in the game, having everybody sort of on the same page and risking their own money as well as the investors' money is something I see, which as I said, is a positive thing. As a principle, I think it's a good idea. On the other hand, the leaving the control in the hands of the founders and putting a lot of the value, I think maybe Chinese VCs that we've seen put more value on the founders as opposed to purely the IP. And we've had discussions with American VCs where they come with their own team and they say, "Thank you for the IP. We'll take it from here." We haven't had that discussion with those sorts of discussions on the Chinese side. But again, sample size of one, as far as I'm concerned. But that's a few things I've noticed.
Okay, thank you, Oscar, for your valuable insights. So basically, if we combine what Sean mentioned earlier, so Chinese companies or even investment funds are sort of stepping up to earlier stages slowly and slowly. And so maybe that could explain that now they are more sitting in the back seat and just observing and trying to help with the development of the company. And then who knows what comes in the future, maybe they will join in with more active role in the future.
It'll be interesting to see how things proceed. Definitely, how they evolve. I think that eventually best practices will align across all the continents, right? Just as Europe is aligned pretty much with the U.S., I imagine China and the rest of the world will align also on a common best practice, or at least individual firms will have their own culture, their own way of doing things.
Yeah, I totally agree. And so basically successful collaboration partnerships are all alike. And then next we will move on to ask the rest of the speakers very quickly because we're a little bit running behind the time. And so let's make in turns to see what is your advice for Swiss company or Chinese companies when they are entering into a collaboration or partnership deal. So now I will first start with Michael Wang. So Michael, what would be your advice?
Thank you, Fiona. I think, well, it's a relative thing for Chinese companies to adopt this going global strategy. So some companies might know what they want, while others might not be very specific about that. So a few things from my earlier deal experiences that I can share with the audience. And number one is called a deal interest or deal chemistry. I mean, we probably need to find at the very beginning about the potential the investor, whether they have a specific needs about your company. Are they asking about your project, your development, things? Do they show the interest? And I think that is important because if they don't show the interest, then it's not going to come out after that. So number two is that it's called deal certainty. And I think you probably need to check with the potential investor about their earlier deal experiences, what sort of requirement, the time or the procedure that they're going to use to close the deal. So I think it's important that they had earlier experience and they could get the job done in a relatively efficient way. And number three is about the money payment. And I think anyone who has earlier experiences know about China has this restrictions about the capital outflow. And there are companies that have offshore accounts that they can pay directly to the investment, and there are companies that has to get the Chinese renminbi out of the country. They have to ask for outbound, direct investment approval. Yeah, this approval process, might take a minimum of 3 months. To 6 months. That adds to the uncertainty of the deal. So basically, those are the things that I think that matter probably the most if you want to have a deal, if you want to close a deal in a more efficient way. And there might be other the consideration as well. If your investor is basically a financial one or it's a industry investor, but we are industry investors, so we're looking for technical transfer as well as licensing of the products in China as well. So there might be other things to check on, but those three, the deal chemistry, the deal certainty, or the payment are the three things that I think that every company has to check to make sure that things might happen between them. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. That's very loud and clear. And now we turn to Sean. Sean, are you here? Sean. Okay, now let's move on to Michael Bauer. So what is your perspective?
Yeah, first, I'd like to confirm what Oscar has described. With many, particularly small European and also the US funds, the discussion was about control. With the Chinese funds, it's much more a partnership approach, in my experience. We are actually active globally. So as we started the trial in Europe, expanded with the US IND, just starting to treat patients in the US. We are filing now China, Taiwan, and South Korean INDs to run the project really globally. And actually, one of our venture partners in Shanghai offered us to actually assign local personnel as project managers to support our activities, keeping the control also over the service providers in the country, as we can't go there due to the lockdown. So from that perspective, a very collaborative approach, and that was very positive in our experience. In terms of advice to Swiss life science companies in general, I would just say be open-minded and see if there is a fit. We've seen everything from finding great people there to more difficult discussions, which we had to stop at some point. So which is nothing unusual if you talk with potential investors. In Western countries, I must say I'm positively impressed by the degree of professionalism and dedication. So if people get engaged, they really get work done, and they turn out really reliable and partners. So deadlines are held, commitments are held. So it's actually a very fruitful discussion and collaboration with the parties we have found to work with.
Thank you very much, Michael. So trust is definitely a thing, and to keep open-minded is another key. And I know Jean-Pierre has a very unique view on this question as well. So Jean-Pierre, so what's your advice?
We've been in this process now for maybe 3-4 years. We've made quite a few deals with China. Actually, I'm in the process of fundraising, or the next project is to make a fund that is dedicated to Sino-Swiss collaboration. And basically, I really appreciated the comment of Sean before when he said that the early stage is better, and that you have to look at the whole dynamic. It's difficult to make deals between China and Switzerland because there is a dynamic that needs to be respected. First of all, it depends on the driver. If the Chinese investment is purely driven by money or the revenue, then the willingness to make a good deal, it's not the same thing as a deal that is driven both by the willingness to do money and bring a product to China. And we're focusing on this, on the second. The rationale is very simple. Swiss company, European market, 350 million people. Swiss company, European market, and China, it's 1.5 billion. So it's a mathematic play in favor of making deals and bring products in China at the same time as you bring in Europe. And to do that, you need to go early. I think we need to break the paradigm that has been existing up to now, where companies would target Europe, US, and then if we have time, let's do the rest of the world. I think that's past. We need to think differently. The big hurdle that we see is fear, lack of alignment of interest, and the fact that it's all together. The fact that when you come late, sometimes the companies have a deal with the US and there is some friction, as we all know, and then it gets difficult to add the new layer of making a Chinese deal. So that needs to be taken as a whole concept. The fear comes from past experience. So companies in Switzerland that want to do deal in China need to overcome their fear. They need to understand it's not because you go to China that you will lose your IP. You need to protect yourself, but there are ways to do that. And one way that you can do is, I mean, we all know this joint venture system or this collaboration system or this setup of a Chinese company. The alignment of interest must be there. Money should be in the Swiss company. If it doesn't go well in China, it must hurt the Chinese investor. The Swiss entity must be motivated to do business in China and accelerate. The development concept should take into account, and it's especially true for pharma development, where the genetic or the ethnicity of the population needs to be taken into account. So that's a process that we're trying to change. I'd say the biggest hurdle is overcome your fear on the Swiss side. Second, have trust in your Chinese partner, and that can be done by networking, recommendation, building the relationship, like has been said many times. You build a relationship over time, and then you find the right people to do the right business. That can be done also, I hope, with a fund that has connection on both sides and can act as an intermediary, also investing the money and facilitating. So it's a whole concept. It's a hard game. We have now made 5 deals in China, and investment in Swiss companies, joint venture in China, whatever. But we had at first about, I would say, 7 or 8 failures. And we learned from the failures, and then you get into a model where you can bring on the table what brings the trust or increase the trust level for Swiss companies, and also makes our Chinese colleagues and our Chinese collaborators and our friends, because we've been working with the same people for 4 or 5 years now, they make them comfortable. So you need to reach this level of trust, and then the system clicks, the pieces click together, and it becomes easier. So I won't elaborate on everything that we've put in place, because there are very clear mechanisms, very transparent and very easy to understand, and it's feasible. It's feasible.
Thank you, Jean-Pierre, for sharing. So I completely agree with you. I think last year I spoke on different occasions about the current status quo between US, EU, and China. So right now it's basically first US and then EU, and then China is part of the rest of the world. But because China has gone through a lot of regulatory changes in the past years, and China has encouraged innovation like in a very different way. So now I think the China we should put somehow next as a first wave instead of second wave that comes after. So totally agree with you. And then of course trust is very important. As lawyer, we've seen transactions from all sorts of transactions, successful ones and non-successful ones. And what we could see is definitely trust is in the core of whether this defines whether it's going to be successful or not. And great. So now let's try again with Sean. Hello, Sean.
Yes. Hi, Fiona.
Great. So we want to hear your voice.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. I think when it comes to to investment or partnering with Chinese investors, I think every company should keep in mind that most of the VC funds or investors in China, I mean most of them have a mandate, have a China mandate, and so they are not like global investor that are looking for opportunities all over the world. Most of them, as required by their LPs, that they need to invest in something that have relationship, some kind of relationship with China, and so I mean, if there's only a few, I would say, global mandate VCs that are, purely financial investors. But most of the funds in China, I think, they're looking for something related to China. So my first suggestion is that, if you're coming to China, get prepared and do some research and work and to see, how your company and how your product fits into the Asian and especially the Chinese market, and be clear what you're looking for strategically. I mean, for the region, I think when that's for financial investor especially, and for when it becomes more complicated when it's a strategic deal. I mean, that's much more complicated, but I think for many foreign companies, most of them don't know even some of the big players in China. So before you engage any kind of commercial partnership, spend more time to know your potential partners well, and do more due diligence especially. And remember that big pharma is not always the best partner for everyone. And I mean, the big ones may be good in clinical commercial capabilities, but it's equally important that you have a good fit in culture, and also your partner has international team, because it's like marriage. I mean, you're going to work together for many years. You want to make sure that both parties will have a good experience over the partnership. So do more due diligence and homework, I think, before talking to Chinese investors. So that's my suggestion. Thank you, Fiona.
Great, Sean. Thank you for sharing. Basically, what you mentioned, do more diligence, also goes hand in hand with one of the points that Jean-Pierre just mentioned. Basically, don't let your fear to come to your way. So do your homework better, and then you will know better, and then you probably will have a more successful partnership. And
yes,
one last thing I could certainly mention is, I think the Western media does give the Western world an impression, probably not true anymore, that IP is a big issue in China. And so I've seen some European companies don't even protect, they don't even file an IP in China. And that is definitely wrong. Like, if you don't have a patent in China, I mean, that means you have no protection. And you can certainly overcome this by hiring a Chinese patent attorney, and there are many good ones. And so secure your assets first, and then do your homework, do your due diligence, and then find a Chinese partner or do it yourself. So China is upcoming. It should be considered as the first wave country to consider in your strategy, in your development plan. Yeah, and we certainly could see the synergy between Swiss and Chinese companies, and let's hope for the best in the future. And since we don't, I think our panel had amazing session today, and everything is very clear, and we don't have any question from the audience today. So I will take the privilege and happily close the session today. So thank you very much for sharing, for discussing, and thank you for attending. So we will see you next year, either in Basel or or online. So thank you very much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye to
Bye-bye.
all.
Hopefully in
Bye-bye.
Thank
Basel.
you. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, great day. Bye bye.